So continuing on, a second way that we're going to use percentages to help us, and we're going to talk about percentages in terms of comparing. So we first talked about percentages talking about a change, and now this time we want to talk about comparing. And so we're describing a comparison, and so in this case, so it's going to be in the same time with two different things. All right, so again, you're going to see the word absolute. This time you're going to see absolute difference and relative difference versus absolute change and relative change. We're still going to subtract and we're still going to divide. But this time, instead of calling it new minus old as we did in our changes, so again, we had new minus old, and then we had absolute divided by old. This time we're going to say that we're going to have instead of the new value, we're going to have the compared. So the compared to value minus the standard value. The standard, we might also say the reference value. So again, we're comparing two things. So we're comparing something to a standard, if you will. The relative is still going to be a division problem. So we're going to take the absolute difference. Why it's doing that. The absolute difference. And we're going to divide that by, instead of the old value, we're going to call it the standard value or the reference value. Okay, this time, so when we did change, we only had to use the word either increase or decrease. But when we're working with comparisons, we need to write a complete sentence, and we're going to use the words more than or less than. Okay, so keep that in mind when we're comparing things. So in 2016, the marijuana tax revenue totaled $256 million in Washington and $60 million in Oregon. Notice that it says in the same year, so again, the same time frame. So in the same year, Colorado brought in $200 million. The data is according to the VS strategies. If Colorado is the standard, so we're using Colorado as our reference, how do the other states compare? So we're going to do first the Washington. And so so Washington is our compare because Colorado is stated as the standard. Okay, so we're just going to follow this. So we're going to have 256 million minus 200 million. And so that equals $56 million. But now again, it's not an increase. We haven't changed from one time to another. We're comparing two things. So we're going to say that Washington made 56 million more dollars or more than Colorado in 2016. All right, so now we want to calculate the relative difference, so we're going to divide. We're going to divide our answer, our 56 million. And we're going to divide that by our standard, which is 200 million. And when we take 56 divided by 200, we're going to equal 0.28 or 28%. So that means Washington made 28% more than Colorado in tax revenue in 2016. So now let's look at Oregon and both their absolute and their relative differences. So Oregon is $60 million. So we're going to take 60 minus 200, and this time we end up with a negative 140 million. Right? So now we know that Oregon made $140 million less than Colorado. Now if we take our negative 140 and divide that by 200, we get a negative answer, and that negative answer is negative 0.7 or 70%. Again, percentages aren't negative, so that's why we're going to say less than. So I'm going to just finish this sentence and make it a combined sentence. As Oregon made $140 million less than Colorado, which is 70% less than Colorado. So looking at the answers for Colorado or for Oregon, does this mean Colorado's revenue was 70% more than Oregon? So in other words, can I just flip the 70%? And instead of having it negative, I make it positive. Well, let's think about how this negative 70% came about. It came about by taking negative 140 divided by 200. And negative 140 came from our absolute difference. So in order for this answer to be positive, I would have to have my answer here to be positive. So I'd have to have 200 minus 60. That gives us our positive 140. But now this value, right, the 200 is now the compare, where the 60 is the standard. And so we would have to take 140 divided by 60, which is now 233.3%, which is Colorado is now being the compared one, made 233.3% more than Oregon. We cannot just flip our negative percent and make it a positive percent and change the wording. We have to actually go through and recalculate, because what we're doing is we're actually changing our standard, which changes our percentage. Anytime we change our denominator, that means we're changing our fraction and therefore changing our computation.